Good evening and thank you for joining me on Black News Tonight. I'm Marc Lamont Hill. In your top headlines, state investigators say the two sheriff's deputies who shot and killed Winston Smith Jr. last week were working undercover. That means their names will not be released. Smith was killed last Thursday as Minneapolis authorities were trying to arrest him on a weapons violation. Smith was in a parked vehicle when the U.S. Marshal Services approached him. They say he didn't comply. They also say that he produced a handgun, resulting in force members shooting him. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension says evidence shows Smith fired his gun, but a woman who witnessed the incident says she never saw Smith with a gun. Both deputies involved were working undercover, so state law bars releasing their identities. Joining me now to talk more about this is Jaylani Hussein. He is the executive director of the Minnesota branch of Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE. Jaylani, welcome back to the show. What do you think of this law, which prevents law enforcement names from being released if the individuals are working undercover?
It just really does not make any sense. You know, we don't have secret police here, and the basis for transparency and accountability is to be able to know what happened, especially after they kill someone. Winston Smith should be here with us today. The powerful story of the only witness, the woman who was in the car, saying that he did not have a gun, and there was no gun in the car. And so this case is very strange, but it is another reminder of the fact that we have a long way to go when it comes to accountability and transparency. They did not have body cameras. They had, I don't know how many cars, the cars didn't have cameras. They literally were working technically to really cover up their actions. And we are demanding justice for Winston. We are demanding for transparency and accountability. This case becomes stranger day by day as the news agencies also are now backtracking because the initial reports that came out were all false. And the community right now is at edge. And many of the same law enforcement agencies who have been working with the U.S. Marshals have all dropped out from this North Star task force. Winston Smith's case is really drawing upon the clarity that the U.S. Marshals system in this country, which historically have been the slave catchers, the true slave catchers of the law enforcement, the earliest law enforcement agency in the country, today continuing on manhunts inside states like Minnesota, not even carrying out federal warrants, but actually state and county warrants. So this case, I think, is a case that should open many people's eyes to these task force that are completely run without really any form of accountability and transparency, and continuously reminding us that we really have a long way to work, and we're asking the Biden administration to right now to have an independent investigation into this matter, because the BCA, the state agency that is supposed to review this, is, I think, conflicted here. The former the U.S. Marshal, Ms. Dolman, who is the current U.S. Marshal for the state of Minnesota, used to be the BCA chief, and she used to supervise the gentleman now who also is the new BCA chief. So there is just a lot of conflict of interest. They still have not had a single press conference to address the community. The media on the ground are spinning their heads as they continue on daily basis retracting the initial statements that have been made by them. So Winston
Well,
Smith's case, I think, is
that's what makes
something.
it so confusing to me. That's what makes it so confusing to me. I mean, there's so many moving parts here, and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, for example, isn't particularly helpful. They're saying they're not even sure if any video of the case exists. They say there's no body camera footage, there's no squad footage. One, can we believe them? And two, how will that impact the case?
Well, first of all, the federal government in February demanded that all of their agencies go under the policy of holding to actually having cameras. They have not done that. And the city of Minneapolis Police Department and the St. Paul Police Department actually pulled out long before from this task force on the basis that they were really reckless and not having body cameras. So the BCA is really just absolutely have failed the community. Not only in this particular case, but all of the other cases. There are police officers investigating police officers. And that is why the state of Minnesota, one of the policies that we have been pushing with our coalition is to create an independent prosecution department that will go after law enforcement actions, and it's independent from the current systems that exist.
Absolutely. That's the accountability that you've been pushing for, that CARE has been pushing for, and that activists around the country have indeed been pushing for. Jaylani Hussein, thank you so much for joining me. All right. Newly released autopsy results confirmed the cause of death of Andrew Brown Jr., who North Carolina sheriff's deputies killed back in late April when authorities opened fire on the 42-year-old black man. The North Carolina Office of the Chief Medical Examiner confirmed today Andrew Brown Jr. shot in back his head and listed his death during the encounter with authorities on April 21st as a homicide. The state's medical examiner added that Brown's time of death was about 3 minutes after authorities who were executing the search warrant in Elizabeth City arrived. That's according to District Attorney Andrew Womble.
One thing I want to point to the autopsy is that there in the report, there's no stippling or gunpowder residue around the entry wound of Andrew Brown's head. That's a clear indication that that bullet was shot from a distance, and a high caliber weapon. They discharged almost 13 to 14 shots at Mr. Brown.
Brown's family is planning to file a federal lawsuit by the end of the month. Virginia's governor has signed a probation reform bill with a little help from rapper Meek Mill. The bill limits the amount of time in prison you can get for violating probation. Under the law, probation must be limited to 5 years from when someone is released from incarceration. Meek Mill, whose real name is Robert Williams, became a reform advocate after a misdemeanor arrest in 2007. That arrest kept him either in prison or on probation for much of his adult life.
I wasn't chasing a lifestyle crime. I was living in Philadelphia where we have 400 or 500 murders a year. Probably I might have 10 friends murdered in a year, where at nighttime I don't sleep. So I turned to using medical drugs to kind of suppress me not sleeping at night and just turning to drugs. It wasn't actually chasing a criminal lifestyle. I was being put in prison for that.
Governor Northam acknowledged that mass incarceration disproportionately affects people of color and that justice must be fair. Psychiatrist Aruma Kilanani is defending comments that she made back in April concerning her fantasizing about killing white people. On April 6th, Kilanani did a live stream called Psychopathic Problem of the White Mind. She talked about the term Karen and the right to not wear masks, videos on the internet. These videos were quite provocative. The psychiatrist talked about her own rage and that she had fantasies of unloading a revolver into the head of any white person that got in her way. Kilanani says it was just a metaphor to evoke emotion. She says her statements weren't for shock value, but for a deeper engagement about race. In North Carolina, Asheville City Council has approved $2.1 million for the reparations fund for the city's black community. The money will come from proceeds of city-owned land. The land was sold during the late 60s and early 70s through the city's urban renewal program. It devastated black communities in the city, and the land is now selling for $3.7 million. The leftover money was already set aside for community block department grants. Activists had previously pushed for the funds to come from cuts to the Asheville Police Department. Actor Morgan Freeman is donating money to the University of Mississippi. He's going to help launch a legal studies center. The center will focus on developing evidence-based practices and training for law enforcement. These activists across the country call for police reform. Freeman teamed up with Professor Linda Kina, the two of them contributing $1 million. And the actor says the recent violent police encounters and the civil unrest that we've seen show a major disconnect between officers and the communities that they serve. The Center for Evidence-Based Policing and Reform is now awaiting approval from Mississippi's institutions of higher learning. Make sure you join the conversation. We want to hear from you. Just head over to our BNC Instagram and Twitter pages. Let us know how you feel. Be sure to check out our website. It's bnc.news.